Fair warning, this show contains strong language and adult themes from time to time. Sorry, Jerry can't help it.
Sick Boy Wolfgang Productions presents The Offering with Jerry Horror. A deep dive into the history of film and its filmmakers. Mostly horror, always genre.
Attention horror movie buffs. Remember the good old days back when Netflix would actually deliver physical media to your mailbox? How often do you find yourself reminiscing about those trips to your local video store, sifting through every single collection, discovering a movie treasure that you've never seen before? If niche is your knack, then Mailbox Movies is the DVD delivery service for you. Their meticulously curated collection has something for every horror enthusiast. From timeless classics to the latest releases, stuff that will keep you up at night.
But Jerry, why should I choose Mailbox Movies?
Well, let me tell you why. Mailbox Movies has an extensive horror DVD selection that you won't find anywhere else. I'm going through the website right now, scrolling down and perusing their available catalog. Not only do they have some of my favorite genre films that I absolutely love, some we've even covered on The Offering, like Scream 2, Halloween H2O, and I Know What You Did Last Summer. But they've even got greater flicks like Trick or Treat, 13 Ghosts, Feast, a whole lot more. You will not believe the selection. With simple online ordering and speedy DVD delivery right to your front door, Mailbox Movies has unbeatable prices that will give you more screams for your buck. Remember to use the promo code JerryHorror for 50% off your first month. Don't settle for less. Get the best in horror delivered to your door. Head on over to mailboxmovies.com and start your terrifying movie marathon today. Welcome to The Offering with me, your host, Jerry Horror. Each week we take a deep dive into the history of film and filmmakers. Mostly horror, always genre. Please take a moment to subscribe to our show wherever you find your favorite podcast to stay up to date on future episodes. Coming up, what would another season of The Offering be without another failed attempt to launch the Dark Universe? To maintain secrecy, every canister of the film was labeled Vatican Directive before being distributed to theaters. When this film failed, its tie-in theme park ride got axed and became Harry Potter and the Forbidden Journey. Stay tuned, you're not going to want to miss this. Ladies and gentlemen, friends beyond the binary, this is The Offering, and I am your host, Jerry Horror. Welcome, folks. I am so glad you're here with me. You're probably, if you're listening to this in real time when it is released, it is the beginning of spooky season. Now, I will tell you, as someone who has worked in all facets of spooky, whether it's haunted houses or, I don't know, I worked at Burger King once, that was pretty spooky. But to be perfectly honest, there are limitations. Okay, look, all right, I'm not going to get upset about this, but I'm going to get a little upset. I think it's officially August 26th when Starbucks decides to unleash the pumpkin spice latte, but some stores have it now. And I think there's like this weird flex where it's like, you know, the whole Ricky Bobby thing. You're either first or you're last. Every D-bag influencer was like, PSL, it's back, bro. Cool flex. It's 100 degrees and you're drinking cinnamon and nutmeg. Congratulations. Look, I love a good pumpkin spice latte. This season, for the autumnal season, they've done an almond spice over at Dunkin' Donuts, and I really want to try that one. It's almond milk, and it's kind of the same thing. All right, let's call a spade a spade. It's a latte with almond milk, right? That's what it is. It's a cold, it's hot, it is, you know. I don't need to be first. If you go to Lowe's, you go to Marshall's, you go to the brick and mortar retail stores, they got the Halloween decorations out. It's crazy. If you told me when I was like 6 years old that I could go to a Home Depot and there would be a Pennywise the Clown animatronic for sale that I could take home, dude, that would blow my mind. As like a 6-year-old kid, I'd be like, oh, let's get all the animatronics. I love animatronics. I love theme parks, so I'm a big animatronic head. Shout out to the Imagineers. They make great stuff over there. They really do make magic. Disney needs to pay their employees, pay their animators. Aside from that fact, spooky season has kicked in hard this year, folks. Everybody's getting their haunted houses ready. People are praying for crunchy leaves and that sort of thing. But I hate these people online. I'm sorry. I'm going to complain. I hate the people online who are like, I wish it was spooky season. And it's like, bitch, can I just enjoy the summer? Can I put on my deep coconut tan oil and just, can I ride this out and we'll have fall when it's fall? Here's the deal, bro. Yo, if you want to have spooky season, I'm living spooky season year round. I don't need to wait for fall. I don't need crisp air and going and picking pumpkins. What a ripoff is that, huh? It's like, come to our property and we'll you go out here on the east end of Long Island, we'll charge you $100 and you get 3 pumpkins. Have a nice day. Fuck you. Fuck you, pay me. It's one of those deals. I live the spooky lifestyle 24/7, 365. I'm going to give you a little secret. You guys, you want the insider secrets. I'll go and I'll buy stuff like, say there's Michael Myers hand towels. Well, guess what? They're probably on sale in July. No, nobody wants it. It's cold, dead product. And now, these days, Americans spend more money on Halloween than any other holiday, more than Christmas, Valentine's Day. It's a huge holiday. It's a huge event. They will spend more disposable income. They'll go see movies. They'll go see horror movies. They will go to haunted houses. They'll buy spooky treats. They'll buy spooky lattes. I guess the fact of the matter is that Halloween is really the glue that is holding this country together, because it doesn't matter what side of the fence you fall on with your opinions, but everybody kind of likes Halloween. Except the really churchy people, like the Ned Flanders of the world. They do not like Halloween. They're like, oh, it's the devil's. But they like it too, because it's spooky for them. They're afraid of the devil, right? So it's a little spooky. Could you imagine growing up that way? And you're like, oh, I desperately want to celebrate Halloween. And you can't go trick-or-treating with the other kids. And the kids are like, oh, we got all this candy. And like, oh, sorry, my dad's into Jesus, so I can't go do that with you. I apologize. I love it. It's great. There is that little gap right before the fall starts between summer, and it's like perfect. It's like absolutely perfect because you know what's to come. But man, people have started decorating their house. I've seen houses already decorated in the summer. People are like, some people are doing this year round. They're like, hey, I've adopted the Jerry Horror methodology and I'm doing this year round. They are. There's no wrong time to watch a horror movie. There's no wrong time to read a horror novel. So why not celebrate it with me? I'm here to officially kick off your spooky season. With that being said, we've got a movie that's kind of spooky today. A little bit spooky. Might scare you. Not really. More of an action film. It really is. It is a swashbuckler. It harkens back to the days of Errol Flynn. And that's really what this film is. But you're going to have to wait until after the break to find out. So stay tuned, boys and ghouls. Time for another classic Jerry Horror adventure. Where are we going today, folks? A little film called Van Helsing. It turns 20 years old this year. Nobody cared. This movie turned 20 years old, and it's literally one of these situations where the studio put out little ads that were like, hey, you can get it on 4K. It was almost like a sneaky thing. They were like, it's available on 4K. I mean, if you want to buy it. Usually these 4Ks, they're like $24.99. Most commercial big studio films, let's just say they're starting at that price. This was like $13.99. Just take it off our hands. There's got to be some fans of this film. Are you a fan of Van Helsing? Let me know.
Bless me, Father, for I have sinned.
Van Helsing! You murderer!
Why can't you tell the world I work for you?
Because we do not exist.
We need you to go to the east.
to the far side of Romania, an accursed land, terrorized by all sorts of nightmarish creatures, lorded over by a certain Count Gruff.
So you're sending me into hell?
Everybody inside!
He's the first one to kill a vampire in over 100 years.
I'd say that's earn him a drink. Some say you're a murderer, Mr. Van Helsing. Others say you're a holy man. Which is it?
It's a bit of both.
I see the wolfman hasn't killed you yet.
Don't worry, he's getting to it.
Hello, Gabriel. We have such history, you and I.
How do you know me?
I'm not even sure how this film is remembered or exactly what the legacy is, other than Hugh Jackman, who probably had, the greatest summer of all time with Deadpool and Wolverine. It was a celebration of the character and of the Fox universe as well as Wolverine himself. But in this film, now this is the crazy thing about this film. This was right after the first X-Men movie. He hadn't signed on. They didn't, with X-Men, they didn't know there was going to be a sequel. They weren't even sure. Fox was very uncertain. They're like, we're taking a chance on this X-Men thing. Maybe it'll be a franchise starter. Maybe it won't. We don't know. So he wasn't signed on for another Wolverine picture. What ended up happening was Universal caught wind of this, and they're like, listen, somebody had seen an early screening of X-Men, and they were like, this guy, he's going to be a big star. They knew. So whatever we do, if we got to throw money at this guy, we're going to get him in this because he's good to do more of these X-Men movies. And they were very confident over at Universal about that. Oh, can I also say, just got to get this out of the way, Hugh Jackman is wearing hair extensions in this movie. If you've seen the interviews and the production stills, it's wild. It's just the craziest looking thing. He's got long hair. It's not really his hair. It's probably horse hair or something of that nature. It's crazy because in some ways it looks natural and in other ways it's freakish. It's like, oh God, what, is that real? He looks like 90s Eric Larson, Marvel Comics artwork, just very, ooh. He has a crop top on in one of those photos. Sexy Hugh Jackman with the crop top on. Look, I don't know what the legacy of this film is. I'm not even sure. But I will tell you, okay, let me roll it back here, folks. I will say this. It is a film where just about every frame and every shot, there is something digital. And that might be the problem. That might be the real issue with this film. Some of these effects have not aged well. And essentially where the effects came from was right after they did the Lord of the Rings films. This was Weta. This is Peter Jackson's people. I can't do him. He's good. I love him. Love Peter Jackson. Shout out. Basically, they took the same software that they created all the digital effects for those films, and this was their first, okay, we're going to get our feet wet into something else. Some of it works, some of it doesn't. And when it doesn't work, it's pretty ghastly. I'm doing this a little bit differently today, guys. I'm bringing my pros and cons right out the gate of my thoughts on this film. And what I will say is it has an excellent score. Very rarely these days, especially because everything's just canned or everything is a jukebox musical, you don't get good scores. You don't. As a fan of film scores and soundtracks, I feel like these days a lot of the stuff is very paint by the numbers, especially if you go into, the 2010s. It becomes a lot of everybody is just aping, the Dark Knight score. Everybody's just aping the Avengers score. So everything is kind of, it's just in the middle. It's kind of flat. Do you get what I'm saying? There's no flavor to any of these scores. This score is fantastic. It's big. It's got Indiana Jones moments. It's got James Bond moments. And that was kind of what they were trying to throw into the character. He was supposed to, he works for the Vatican. And he's a big, larger-than-life character. He's a hero. He is your guy. Hugh Jackman took this part. He took the part just because he loved Errol Flynn movies growing up, and he was like, I want to do this. So you do have this big, bombastic score that matches that tone. And I'll tell you, it's probably my favorite thing about this movie is the score. It's so good. It's done by Alan Silvestri. Silvestri's done everything. He did Forrest Gump. He's done Avengers Endgame. He's done so many things. And that's it. It's a great score. There's really nothing much more to it than that. It's just a good musical score. I'm sorry. So I guess we've hit the high, and now it's time to get to the lows of Van Helsing, which I have very split feelings on. It's a little over 2 hours, and I feel that there is a 90-minute banger in this movie. You could probably edit this movie down to a tight, maybe, you know what, I'll even be generous, tight 100 minutes. Boom, done, in, out. Otherwise, it's a bit of a chore. It's a bit of a chore. I'm sorry, I said it. Here's a positive. There's always something happening. There's always action in the movie. I kind of noticed that was the carryover from The Mummy, where it's like, how many set pieces can we stick into this film to make it go faster? Well, who made the film go faster? Enter director Stephen Sommers. He had written a number of movies, most famously Tom and Huck, which was a Jonathan Taylor Thomas vehicle for Disney. Another Disney film that he did was the live-action Jungle Book with Jason Scott Lee. They liked him. They thought he was a good writer, and they wanted to keep him in-house. But I think there was a part of him that was like, I really don't want to write kids' movies for the rest of my life. I really need to make a jump into something else. You know what else he wrote? He wrote A Gunman, which was the Christopher Lambert and Mario Van Peebles vehicle. That was a direct-to-video. Gunman was good. It had a rap soundtrack. I don't remember much of it. It wasn't that good. It was okay. It's like the last movie where Christopher Lambert is like slightly muscular. He kind of like still looks like the Highlander because he was an older guy. He got a late start in life, so he aged quicker. This is a big break. If you want, let's talk about big breaks. Stephen Sommers' first big break, he did an Oliver Twist teleplay that he wrote and directed for NBC. So that's where this guy starts. And we all have humble beginnings. You got to start somewhere, right? That's what they say. Absolutely. Sommers cut his teeth on a lot of kids' product. If you look at a lot of different creators, whether it's Nickelodeon or the Disney Channel, that's where you get a lot of people who go on to do bigger things. They start out in the kids medium. And I think the reason is A, it's a paycheck, but B, you can't go too far with kids. You got to have a clear conscience to make something that has some merit or value, some nutritional value for kids. So when you have to work in those parameters, I think it makes you, some people say it's confining, and I get it. I totally get it. But I think if you have to work with kids' properties, you got to have a softer touch. You know, even Tim Burton had to lighten it up a little bit. So in 1998, he gets a shot to make his feature debut with a film called Deep Rising. I love Deep Rising. It's Treat Williams, Famke Janssens in it. It's a B movie. It is a capital B movie. It's schlocky. And it's got monsters. And there's digital work in that movie, and it still looks good. Because, why does it look good? Because they didn't have much money to make that movie, and they didn't have second chances. So a large part, especially with these earlier films and digital effects, it's the lighting. If you don't get the lighting right, if you don't nail it, and then you insert those digital effects, they look bad. But these look great. I'm telling you, go watch Deep Rising. You'd be like, holy shit, these effects hold up. It's like Jurassic Park. I really enjoy this movie, this Deep Rising. Even as schlocky as it is, it really works for me on a lot of levels. Treat Williams is great in it too. You know what else he's good in? He's good in those direct-to-video substitute movies, because the first film has Tom Berenger, and the second film is called The Substitute 2, School's Out. That's Treat Williams, and then he's in the third movie, and then he's in the fourth movie. I heard in the fourth movie they take on like a neo-Nazi group, and I haven't seen it. Angie Everhart's in it, if you remember her. Yeah, that's, I guess Treat Williams fights skinheads. So check that out. A group of heavily armed hijackers board onto a luxury ocean liner in the South Pacific Ocean to loot it, only to do battle with a series of large-sized, tentacled, man-eating sea creatures who have already invaded the ship. Come on, dude. It sounds amazing. It's like the dumb version of The Thing, and that's why it works. It has its tongue firmly planted in its cheek. It's very aware of what it is, and I think sometimes that's important, especially when you're making a genre movie. You know, you can do it direly serious like Aliens, or you could do it like this movie where you're like, all right, let's relax. Let's not take this too seriously. I mean, the coolest scene in the movie when he's on the jet ski and the ship is flooding and he's like going uphill to get out of the ship. So he's riding the jet ski through hallways. What is that? Why do we want to do that? Why do I want to do that? When I was a kid, I used to fantasize about riding a motorcycle through the halls of our school. And that's weird. I don't know what that's about. Okay. So let's pivot here. Originally, Guillermo del Toro was supposed to direct this movie. Turned it down. He was like, I'm not going to do that. GDT, he turned down a lot of stuff. He was supposed to do the Elm Street series. It's like, I don't know about that. It's like, the crafty GDT. He kind of cemented his own career his way. So shout out to him. So Summers replaced GDT. Last minute, Guillermo was like, I'm not doing this movie. And Summers came in, he replaced him at the last minute. They said, well, this guy's done a bunch of stuff for Disney. I'm sure he can do a sea creature movie. Sea creatures are cool. Let's have more sea creature movies. I love, give me a big squid. Give me a big squid. Give me a big stingray. Even crazier is that Deep Rising's original ending. And this is crazy about this movie. The original ending is that the surviving cast members end up on this island, and then we hear this roar. Like, they shot this. The Deep Rising movie was a backdoor pilot for a King Kong movie. But that was when Guillermo del Toro was still involved with Deep Rising. He was like, well, there's not enough meat on the bone for me with this movie. So if I do this movie for you, will you let me do King Kong? And the studio liked it so much that they're like, we're going to keep this in there and it will be like a setup. And then they shot it and they showed it in test screenings and people were like, wait, this is a King Kong movie now? Like, that's how this movie ends? And people were very confused. And now what's the biggest thing going? All these Kong Monsterverse movies, right? Here's the problem with Deep Rising. The movie cost $45 million and then its worldwide take was $11 million. So that's, Summers was pretty sure that his goose was cooked and he would never direct again. The movie did make money on VHS, made money on DVD. See, here's the reason I'm talking about Deep Rising so much. Because this is what cements his career. One night, one of the heads of Universal was at the video store. He goes to Blockbuster. Him and his family were going to go to the movies, but they decided we're going to make it a Blockbuster night. So they go to the store and there's nothing in. It's a rainy Saturday night. If you don't remember the phenomenon of video stores, if there was a weather event, people went. If it was going to snow, people would rent 28 tapes. That's just the way it was. They hunkered down. The only thing that's in at the store that him and his kids want to watch is Deep Rising, which was a flop. Like, nobody saw it. It didn't make money. So he takes the movie home. He's with his kids and they love it. This is a great movie. So that same executive who saw that movie, he was involved with the big heads at Universal, and they kept saying, we need to get this Monsterverse thing off the ground. We need to get the Universal monsters back. I've told you, we've talked about this on all these previous episodes. Universal, there is a cycle. I guess it's every 5 to 10 years, they just get a wild hair and they have to do a Universal Monsters thing. It's crazy, but it happens. So they say, like, okay, well, what's the best movie we can make from this series? Like, let's bring back The Mummy. There's been vampire movies. There's been Dracula. There's been Frankenstein, right? There's been everything. But you haven't had creature movies. You even had Invisible Man. People tried doing the Invisible Man. Some like John Carpenter, he did the one with Chevy Chase, The Memoirs of an Invisible Man. Not very good. The effects still look good in that movie because they worked hard to make them. But I think it was time. They felt, hey, The Mummy doesn't have anything that's connected to it. They basically asked him, they're like, hey, Steve, how would you like to do a Mummy movie? He says, okay, I'm going to do it. Now, The Mummy 1999 was a pretty big hit. This is the Brendan Fraser one. It grossed over $400 million. On DVD, it was an absolute killer. It sold over $120 million on DVD. You see how profitable this is now for these companies. It's always been about the VHS and the DVD sales. The sequel, The Mummy Returns, which comes out a few years later in 2001, that movie made almost $500 million at the box office. Adjusted for inflation, it's about $900 million now, which is insane. So, of course, The Mummy Returns gets its own spin-off, which was the one with Dwayne Johnson playing the Scorpion King. One problem that, obviously we've talked about. Have we ever talked about this? It's The Rock. He is the Scorpion King, and then at the end he becomes this creature where he's half scorpion, half man, and it is the worst. It's got to be the worst. For me, it's the worst. It's just the worst CGI you've ever seen. It looks like a derpy version of Dwayne Johnson. It looks like he had like a stroke or something. I don't know. It just doesn't look right. It's kind of terrible. You got to look at it, judge it for yourself. So Summers was like, listen, man, I don't know if I want to do more digital effects because that was so bad. It really upset him. Like, it upset a lot of people. But this is what would happen. It was still a new technology and they didn't know. And in the end, it ended up looking like a PlayStation 2 game, which was not good. It was kind of ugly. He's made them over $1 billion now, right? All right, blank check, dude. What do you want to do? You can do anything. And he says, well, I'd like to do the Universal Monsters. And they came to him and they said, hey, we were thinking the same exact thing. So they gave him the keys to the kingdom. Essentially, what happens is he gets complete control over the Universal Monsters. Well, let's use Van Helsing. Let's use Van Helsing as the hero. He will be the vessel. And they made it like he's a James Bond 007 for the Vatican, and he handles all like demons and monsters, and he investigates things, and he's got like all these weird future tech weapons, which, like, if you're playing a video game with Van Helsing, yes, the future tech weapons and weird spinning things and blades, yeah, it's cool, especially like if you're a little kid. And I have to say, if there's one thing you take away from Van Helsing, this is a great movie for kids. I was older when this came out, obviously. I was in my 20s. But the reality of the situation is that if I was like 6, I would have loved Van Helsing. It's such a great adventure movie. Now, again, the CGI is terrible, okay? We cannot overstate that is kind of the thorn in this film's side. It is very lavish production. When you see there is some model work, there's some matte paintings in this movie, and it's all done very beautifully. The film is very well lit, but again, when they start doing things, they didn't have the volume, the simulator that they pretty much started shooting everything in now, but they had green screen. So specific portions of the set would be green screen and the rest would be real and practical. And it became kind of this eyesore because you knew, even if you didn't know, your brain knew subconsciously. You're like, that's not real. Whatever that is not happening. I think part of Summers' approach to this film was, we need to franchise this. We absolutely have to franchise this. The movie originally opened up with this big scene with the creature from the Black Lagoon. And it's Van Helsing, and it just cold open, boom, he's fighting this thing. He's fighting the creature from the Black Lagoon. And he kills it, because that was going to be their badass title card. Like, it cuts the head off, and it's like, Van Helsing. But they cut it out because Stephen Summers was like, that's our sequel. This is the craziest thing to me, was he even said if they were able to pull off this movie, the next movie was Brendan Fraser's character and Van Helsing teaming up to fight the creature from the Black Lagoon. I kind of want to see that now. I like Brendan Fraser, and I like Hugh Jackman. I think together, that's something like you're cooking with gas now. If there's anything that you take from this episode, it is grand ambition, because the grand ambition of Van Helsing is that it's a franchise non-starter, folks. Here we are. You knew it was coming to this. It is a movie with grand ambitions that looks to have sequels and all of this stuff. They did it. Well, we'll get into that later, but they did a pilot for a cartoon, and that's a part of the nature of this film. Here's what I think part of the problem was with this movie. When you see the trailer, you're like, yo, this looks pretty cool. I'm into this. Hugh Jackman being badass. He's got the long leather trench coat. He's got the hat. He looks like Vampire Hunter D. Wow, this is cool looking. But the problem is that, like, I think if Van Helsing was an R-rated movie, it would have kind of pleased that video game edgelord crowd a little bit more. But that's not what the movie is. It could be, but I think they wouldn't have spent the amount of money that they spent on this movie. You'd probably get a much dialed down. It would be more akin to something like the original Blade, where it would be violent, you'd have a lot more prosthetic work, and it'd be bloody. And I'm open to that too, but that's not what we got. We got a kid's movie. And I think if you watch the advertisements to this film, they're selling the action component. The part they should have been selling was the swashbuckling, because that's really what it is. You know, you got your guy, the trope, which is the guy swinging on the rope. Hugh Jackman is swinging on all kinds of ropes in this movie. He is just swingity-dinging through the whole, it's like, it's not even like Indiana Jones where he does it like once or twice a movie. He is just swinging around. And that is the influence of the Errol Flynn era. You know, you've got, that is the daring do, the sword fights, it's all in there. That's why Jackman really did take the part. He's like, I want to do something, you know, that my kids could watch. This was a great vehicle for him. He's good with choreography because he's a song and dance man. So when you see him move and he's doing the fight sequences, it's very convincing. A lot of times, it's crazy, I've heard this, they will take an actor, and even when they're prepping them for martial arts fight sequences, you're going to learn dance. And you learn dance, and then it becomes the fundamental of how you present yourself as an on-screen fighter. And you start to learn rhythm and timing, because at the end of the day, the fight sequences are a dance. They really are. It's a choreographed dance between 2, 3, 4 opponents, whatever it is. Jackman excels at that. They basically knew they had to have a strong lead for this film. And what's crazy is that they ended up, obviously, at Kate Beckinsale. Oh my God, dude. Everybody got offered this part. You could go down the laundry list. Jennifer Connelly got offered it. Liv Tyler got offered it. It was just like one after the other. And both of them were in Hulk movies, which is kind of a weird thing. But they went down the list. They even tried to get Julia Roberts. I don't know what they were thinking, but it happened. They finally landed on Kate Beckinsale because one of the guys who was doing the casting was like, oh wait, she was in Underworld and she was a vampire, and this she'll be a human. And that was their reasoning. Like, they were just like, well, she'll bring over the Underworld franchise, you know? And I don't know why anybody didn't see that. Like, they're like, wait, that's the girl who's in like 5 of those Underworld movies? Listen, I like hot girls in leather. I do not like the Underworld series. It is just the CGI werewolves in that first film. When I saw Underworld, I literally went and had a cigarette. I was just like, in the middle of the movie, I'm like, I'm not even to pee or anything. I was just like, I don't like this. I'm like, this sucks. Like CGI werewolves, and I get it. I think Underworld would make a great TV show, and I think with the effects now, you could probably do it. She wanted to do this movie because obviously she's looking to up her value in the game. Co-starring Hugh Jackman. He's the hot guy. He's the new Mel Gibson, except he's nowhere near as problematic. He's actually a good person. And it was an opportunity for her to do something a little bit different. She's in a ghouls and ghosts movie, but she's not the ghoul or the ghost this time. She's just a princess, which is crazy because there's her brother who's the prince. I'll recount a little bit of the plot. What happens is the Vatican's like, oh, Van Helsing, you gotta go help these people. There's a prince and a princess, and Dracula's coming, and he's gonna kill the bloodline. And he's like, all right, I guess I'll go handle that. You know, Van Helsing doesn't even know what to do. He's just kind of like, what's my mission? And like, just go get rid of Dracula. All right, that's the plot of this movie. Because, man, there ain't a lot of plot to this movie. There's a lot of fighting, fisticuffs, and action sequences, but there is not, like, we're talking in terms of plot. I mean, the film opens up, right? And it's a throwback. And I'll say this. If you watch the first 5 minutes of this film, just watch that. You could shut it off if you want. It is the coolest homage. And this is one of the things that really turned me on. They shot in the same places that they shot like The Mummy and all the original Universal monster movies. They shot Van Helsing. Like, it was same sound stages. And to me, that's awesome. Like, all right, we're taking this seriously. And Universal did. They're dumping money into this thing. And they're saying to themselves, all right, let's do this the right way. So it opens up, you got this black and white sequence, you got the villagers, you got the fire, and man, it's cool. I'm saying to myself, this is the better movie. He could have made this in black and white, and it would have been like killer. It would have been just like, wait, what? Because those films, and that's always been the problem with the Universal monsters, is once you jump into color, things change. They don't look the same. Dracula works, Frankenstein works because of the lack of color. There's very stark contrast, very deep, big, bold. It works on a level that I don't think you can get out of color. So that opening, just sensational. And I wish the rest of the movie was that. Unfortunately, it's not. So our good pal Van Helsing goes there. He meets Dracula. And this Dracula can turn into a gargoyle, which is like really weird because, oh man, like Stephen Sommers was like, I want to set myself apart from other things. So he's like, instead of a bat, he turns into this gigantic bat creature, which the bat creature is cool. But the problem that they had, and this is even with, there's harpies in this movie because he has a coven of harpies. They digitally put the actor's face, they kind of like laid it over the CGI, and it looks weird, man. And that's when he's the gargoyle thing, and that's when the harpies, because they turn like human to show their human face, and it looks bad. It just looks like floating heads. It's just weird, like the neck, none of it connects. If there's any sequence that takes you out of the movie, it's when you see them with the human faces on the CGI body. It's like, ooh, this is rough. Yeah, Dracula's like, I'm gonna kill this prince and this princess. Obviously, Princess Kate Beckinsale. And she's like, no, you're not going to kill me. So Van Helsing's here, and he's going to save the day. So Van Helsing comes to the village, and then he finds out. And this I didn't like, okay? I'm going to get into pluses and bonuses here. Dracula in this movie is making Frankenstein. Dracula is Dr. Frankenstein, if that makes sense. And he's got like his own version of Igor. So we're kind of rolling things in. Instead of having these be separate characters, we're just amalgamating them, which I guess for time or for whatever he wanted to get across here, like, yeah, it works. The Frankenstein monster in this movie is fantastic. He's all practical. It was stilts and it was a big suit. I think the suit itself weighed around 300 pounds. The Frankenstein in this movie, because of the stilts that are underneath the actor's feet, he's like 7'2", 7'3". It's a real practical thing that people get to act against, and that really sells it. The Frankenstein's monster in this movie is very impressive. He's so cool. The design is so cool. You're like, I want an action figure of this. This is pretty neat. It doesn't really come together because Dracula's making the Frankenstein monster. We're trying to move the pieces along as fast as we can to get to the next action sequence. And that becomes the problem with this movie. Because, yes, there's monsters, he's fighting monsters, but it's more like an action movie. There's all these like little various vampire creatures and stuff. You know, with the MPAA, it's just like the Avengers movies when they fight all these faceless things. As long as it doesn't have a face, like a human face and look like a human or bleed red, you can just kill these things. And that was the approach with this. See, there feels like there's no gravity to it because a lot of the times they're fighting these CGI opponents and creatures and there's no weight to it. The other problem too is that because this is post-Matrix, even X-Men did it, we're doing wire work. We're doing a lot of Hong Kong wire work. If you count the backflips in this movie, Kate Beckinsale alone does about 30, I swear to God, I was counting. She does about 30 backflips in this movie. It is like, wow, that's her go-to move. So stylistically, it's very a product of its time. It's that whole era where we're wearing tight black leather, we're doing flips and everything's slow motion, brother. Some of it works, some of it doesn't. There was a whole thing too. There was going to be a subplot in this movie about Jack the Ripper. And then Jack the Ripper turns out to be Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Come on, dude. You're just rolling things together. Like, can't Jack the Ripper and Dr. Jekyll be two separate characters? So that was going to be a subplot. And they cut that out of the movie, and they put that in the cartoon. And I think it's a, what do they say, like a turducken or a hat on a hat? Like you just keep combining characters and doing these things. So they cut this subplot out. And the other problem I had was the guy who plays Dracula in this, he was also the villain in the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. Oh my God, dude. And you want to talk about it. It's another film of that era. It made Sean Connery quit acting, but he's the villain in both of these movies. And I don't think this guy is a bad actor, but I have to be honest with you. League of Extraordinary Gentlemen is just trash. He's not good in that movie. Nobody's really good in that movie. He's an okay Dracula. But I don't know. I think it's just that they gave all these guys weird powers. So we find out, okay, we're skipping ahead a little bit more because, like I said, there isn't much plot to this movie. Hugh Jackman's a werewolf. And yes, you heard that right. Van Helsing, our title character, is a werewolf. The one cool thing that I like that he did was that he didn't want to rip off an American Werewolf in London and have the fur grow out. And what he does with this movie, which is really cool, is that they tear their skin off. So he tears his skin off, but it's gruesome. You can't, again, it's a PG-13 movie for the family. So it can't be like, imagine like the guts, like I'm ripping his guts out and he's turning into this. That would be pretty cool. But it's a PG-13 movie. It's all digital nonsense. And listen, I'm going to tell you, the harpies, the bad effects, everything. When we get to the end and Dracula becomes the gargoyle monster and he becomes the werewolf, that's it. I'm out of this movie. Like, I noped out of it. I'm just like, all right, what are we doing? And then what's even worse than that is that, so Van Helsing is a werewolf, Dracula is the gargoyle monster, and they're fighting through Frankenstein's castle. But it's not Frankenstein's castle because Dracula is Dr. Frankenstein, which is absolutely ridiculous, but whatever. It looks like a little kid taking two action figures and just smashing them on top of each other, and that becomes the third act of this film. It's just all CGI gobbledygook. Hey, look, no spoilers or anything here, but Van Helsing, kills Dracula or whatever. And he saves the prince and the princess. Well, actually, nope, he didn't. Because Stephen Sommers decided we've got to kill Kate Beckinsale and we've got to kill her brother, the prince. So that pissed audiences off. They were like, ooh, why? Like, he's supposed to get the smooches from her at the end. He's like, oh, I'm Hugh Jackman, give me the smooches. And she's like, oh, Hugh Jackman, I'll give you the smooches. And it's nice, it's a nice ending. We got the sunset. Nope. He kills the prince and the princess. And Hugh Jackman's like, well, I guess I'm a gigantic failure. It's like, how do I explain this to the Vatican? Well, I've certainly dinged this up, right? So they shot this extra sequence, and the sequence is, and it is one of the worst atrocities, again, committed to the digital stuff in this movie. You see Kate Beckinsale and her brother, and you have to watch this because I can't even explain it. It's so bizarre. They're up in the sky with their father, their ancestor, who was the original Van Helsing, who is trying to slay Dracula, if that makes sense. So they're in the sky and you see like these weird ghostly outlines and they're hugging each other and kissing each other. And Hugh Jackman is watching this and I'm like, are they going to get it on? And Hugh Jackman's going to sit there and watch this in the clouds. So they tacked on this ending after they had shot the movie and audiences were like, oh, I like this better. I have a sense of closure. There is no reason on God's green earth, there is no reason for this scene to exist. It just needed to be Van Helsing walking down the road. He's going to go fight frogmen. Whatever he goes on to do, that's what he's going to do. And he rides off into the sunset. No, we're looking at the sky and there's ghosts. And it all looks like shit because it's early 2000s CGI. And, well, that is my retelling of Van Helsing. And that's the episode. So you get absolute trash. No, it's not that bad. It's a pretty good movie for what it is. Like, again, if you have kids that are under 10, you have nieces and nephews that are under 10 years old, and it's spooky season, throw this movie on. Like, it's cool. It's got the monsters. Universal was like, we're going to do 1 million of these. Van Helsing's going to go to the moon. They literally had 3 or 4 sequels planned out. And I told you the one with him and Brendan Fraser and the creature from the Black Lagoon. The plan was that Dracula was always going to come back somehow. Like in the next movie, he would have been gone, but they would have done another movie. And then Dracula was going to be, it was going to be a 5-movie cycle where Dracula like appears in every other one until Hugh Jackman and Dracula have their big finale fight. But you got to make money to get to that fifth movie. And again, I appreciate the grand ambition that this film had. And they thought, they're like, this is it. This is how we reintroduce the Universal monsters. Have we changed things? Yes. Stylistically, we've changed stuff and it works. Some of it doesn't work. They decided early on, listen, if we're doing this movie and we're bringing the monsters back and people love these classic Universal monsters, we've got to do a ride.
We'll be right back with more of The Offering with Jerry Horror.
Woo, spicy! The Killer Cook Barbecue Sauce and Dry Rub Company was founded on the basis of bringing global flavors to the American palate. Handcrafted barbecue sauces made from nostalgic sodas, based out of Port Jefferson, New York, Killer Cook will bring the unexpected out of the familiar in food, creating exciting flavor combinations, resulting in food that is so delicious, it's deadly. I'm reading some reviews now on their website. Here's a few that caught my eye. My man's brisket is amazing, but the rub, wow. That's the Killer Cook's Lower East Side brisket rub getting a 5-star review. Here's another one. Brought this in from my brother who loves to cook. He's also a big Mortal Kombat fan. I know he's going to find it as funny as I did, and the flavor sounds right up his alley as well. Another 5-star review from the Chow Chan Rub, the biggest, baddest flavor boss of all the realms. And finally, here's the 5-star review for the Killer Cook's Passport to Flavor gift set. Absolutely love the product. Joy is very pleasant to work with. The product is beautifully packaged. Couldn't have asked for better service. Guys, globally inspired dry rub collection, chef crafted in small batches. Salts, sugars, seasonings, barbecue sauce, and soda shop. All killer, folks. No filler. Visit thekillercook.com to spice up your basic bitch barbecue. The term cult film itself refers to the subculture that surrounds underground films and midnight movies. A cafe is usually a small and informal establishment serving various refreshments in an intimate and inviting setting. What do you get when you combine the two? You get the Cult Cafe, located at the Cinema Arts Center in Huntington, New York. Every Saturday night at 10 p.m., Cult Cafe brings you the best in cult film and beloved classics. Curated with care, especially for a devoted fan base of cinephiles. Cult Cafe is where box office bombs are resurrected, and more obscure, transgressive films, shunned by the mainstream, can find a home beautifully projected on a large silver screen. Past movies screened at the Cult Cafe include David Cronenberg's Videodrome, Frank Henenlotter's Basket Case, John Carpenter's The Thing, Sam Raimi's Evil Dead, Victor Bonacor's Thrust, and Richard Kelly's Donnie Darko. Man, the programming there is on point. For tickets and showtimes, head on over to cinemaartscenter.org to find a listing of films, or add Cult Cafe on Facebook to find a series of upcoming events. There really is nothing like seeing an old favorite in a theater full of your fellow movie fans. Hey, maybe I'll even see you there. Cinema will never die at the Cult Cafe. Listeners and fans of The Offering can get their hands on their very own The Offering with Jerry Horror merch, now only at TeePublic. Find your own fresh The Offering with Jerry Horror high-quality merchandise, including t-shirts, hoodies, tank tops, long sleeves, stickers, and mugs. Just like the show, we've got gear that's mostly horror, always genre. The Offering with Jerry Horror TeePublic store has everything you need to represent your favorite podcast. Folks, head on over to teepublic.com right now and pick up your very own Offering tee today. You're listening to The Offering with Jerry Horror. Got a question or a story you want to share with me? It might be featured in a future episode. Email me at jerryhorror@gmail.com or hit me up on Twitter at jerryhorror. I'm also on Instagram. You can find me there at jerryhorror. Rate and review this show on Apple Podcast, and you might find your review in an upcoming episode. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to The Offering. Now back to the show. So they have the Kuka arm technology, which is basically like a gigantic robotic arm, and you're sitting and it moves you around and it can bring you left to right, up and down. It's omnidirectional. They said, we're going to do a ride, and it's going to be Van Helsing, Journey to Transylvania. They develop the whole ride. They start to develop the animatronic. You're going to be through Hugh Jackman's perspective, and we'll have him, and he'll be with you. This ride sounds awesome. First off, I'm like, oh, we get to see all the Universal monsters and travel through their world. I'm in. That sounds pretty cool. But you kind of know what happens. Van Helsing comes out and it breaks even. Okay? We're talking about the movie cost them, I think, about $150 million. It made $300 million. And ultimately what happens is they broke even. They spent so much money on advertising and marketing for this film because it was going to be this was their big event film. They thought it was going to be huge. And ultimately it just wasn't. It just really wasn't. Once you consider that if you spent $150 on the movie, you would say the marketing budget is about another $150. So they got scared. They got cold feet, and they're like, It's not even, here's the craziest part of this entire story, to me at least. 7 days after the movie opened, the Universal Studios executives were like, that's it, we're done. Like, no more Van Helsings. Like, it was over. It wasn't even like, oh, well, it languished in production hell, and they're like, ooh, we could really do a sequel. Nope. It didn't go down like that. They were just like, we're out of the Van Helsing business. Just in case you were keeping score with everything we've been talking about, the Van Helsing ride turns into Harry Potter and the Forbidden Journey, which is a fantastic ride. It's one of my favorites at Universal. It's just great. It really jostles you around, and it has an amazing queue. It really does bring you into that world. And I would say that's really one of the best things at Universal is like, the Harry Potter stuff really is bringing you into this. It's another reality. It just, you're really there. The way they're able to block the sight lines and stuff. You got dragons on the top of buildings. You got fake snow. You almost feel like, oh, is it cold here? Because there's all the fake snow. I love it. I think they're great. And they're doing the expansion. But you know what they did do? They canceled the ride. It becomes a cheap Halloween Horror Nights haunt. They did like the terror of Van Helsing. And there was a guy who kind of looked like Hugh Jackman, and he had hair extensions too, probably a wig. It's not the extensions, he got a wig. So he's got a wig on, and you went through and they had their version of all these Stephen Sommers characters. And by all accounts that I looked up online, it was pretty lame. You know, you got to the park and you were like, oh wow, we get to see Michael Myers. Oh wow, we get to see, you know, Evil Dead and Ash. And then it's like, here's a movie that kind of flopped this year that, you know, like it made money, but nobody really cares about it. It was like, oh, Van Helsing. I don't know. So it was the least trafficked house that they had that year. Also, I would like to say for the record, the house never came back. It's not like 5 years later they were like, hey, everybody remember Van Helsing? Well, here it is again in 2015. And that did not happen. There seems to be little to no affection for this movie, if that makes any sense. I'm telling you, like usually with a lot of this stuff, after 20 years, you get big nostalgia vibes, and not with this. The film did perform very well on DVD. It did $80 million, and that was the bulk of like, oh, this is where they really saw the profit. They were like, wow, okay, so people know who this character is. Like, maybe we can still do something with this. So, because of that, a spin-off television series was pitched to NBC, which would have been called Transylvania. It was to have featured like a Wild West sheriff, and he's taken to Europe to battle with monsters. The TV show would have occasional guest appearances with Hugh Jackman as Gabriel Van Helsing. Okay, like I get it. Like it's a good way to keep it alive, and then maybe you can have that character, that Western sheriff, come over to the movies, and he could cross over. Okay, fine. The whole, and I hate to bring this up again, but the series ends up being completely stillborn. Like it never gets off the ground. And it's partly because the makeup effects, they would have had to shoot it in Romania. It would have just been too expensive. They were like, this is easily going to cost us $1 million. And we are not spending $1 million per episode for Van Helsing. Like we'll spend $300,000, but that's about where we're capping this. And they said, nah. And they expected this movie to open huge. They were like, it's going to make $100 million. I'm like, nope. It ended up opening kind of like $50 million. And they really thought, they were like, oh, we're going to make 120. Like, we're going to do Spider-Man numbers. No. No. That didn't happen, folks. Spoiler alert. A few years later, we're just skipping through time. In 2009, a Van Helsing reimagining was announced by Universal with Guillermo del Toro directing and Tom Cruise starring, but that failed to materialize. And Tom Cruise would go on to make The Mummy, previous episode, sick plug. We all know the quality of that film, and if you don't, go back and listen to the episode, and you shall find out. I talk about it. Guillermo del Toro that summer decided, I'm going to do Crimson Peak, which is a good movie. I've gone on record, I like Crimson Peak. It's a really good movie. It's an effective, creepy film. Big Victorian Gothic manners and that sort of thing. You got Tom Hiddleston's running around. Hey, it's a good movie. Got something going on here. A little old school Hammer horror. Yes, kids, there were video game spin-offs because, oh Lord, you knew there had to be. The PlayStation 2 and Xbox respectively got a Devil May Cry clone, which even, again, Devil May Cry influenced by the anime and the manga Vampire Hunter D, which is where all this stuff comes from, even Castlevania. Van Helsing, kind of a good Castlevania movie, if that makes sense. This game was not bad. Honestly, if you can find it and you still have an emulator or you can play it, places, I went back and I played this and I liked it. I thought the video game was better than the movie because, like I said, he's got all these gadgets and cool things and you fight the monsters and you kill them. To me, there are very few in that era of video games. A lot of them, there's a lot of licensed trash. Like if you've played like X2, Wolverine's Revenge from that same era, that's a bad game. But this works for me and you can play it now. And I think it's one of the only things from this movie that's kind of like people seek out the physical copies of the discs because A, it's a decent game, but B, it's an oddball. It's like, oh, what? There's a Hugh Jackman. And Hugh Jackman did come back and he did his voice for the video game, which, you know, like if you want that, it's official. It's official. There was a Game Boy Advance game that was a top-down hack and slash. I think it was another video game that had been reskinned and cutscenes added for Van Helsing. It's not very good. It is not worth your time. You can find it if you have an emulator, you do that sort of thing. You can play it. I don't recommend it. Play the Xbox and the PS2 versions. So the other thing too with this film was they decided, hey, at the same time, we're also going to do an animated series. This all happened. To me, this is insane because now we're just marketing to kids. There was an animated prequel movie called Van Helsing, The London Project. Hugh Jackman came back to voice the role again. In this adventure, it's what was cut from the film. He tries to capture Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, who is also Jack the Ripper. You confused? Yeah, me too. It's 30 minutes. It's not terrible, but it's no animatrix. It's very flat and it's very obvious, like, okay, this is a pilot. Like, we are watching a pilot for a Van Helsing cartoon. Nope. It's a big fat nope on this one too. There's just nothing to it. There's no meat on the bone. It's not very good. Stylistically, everything looks brown. The animation is kind of janky, but they had to do it because this was going to be their $1 billion movie. I told producer Pete, I'm like, Van Helsing, $1 billion, going to make $1 billion. It didn't. It just, we know that it made 300, but it wasn't enough because of all the costs involved. Now, one thing I will talk to you about is the toys. The toys are very nice. And again, like I said, I love the design of some of the creatures. I actually, look, if I can go into one of these stores and I can find a Frankenstein from Van Helsing, I'm buying it because it's cool. Jack Specific, who is most famous for their WWF wrestling figures at the time, they produced a gigantic line. They said, hey, let's do like 4 figures. We'll do a vehicle. And Universal was like, no. So they fronted Jack Specific like all this money. And they're like, we're going to do it all. We're going to do the castle. We're going to do the harpies. And there's going to be like 25 figures in this line. Because they're like, we're going to Star Wars it. We can start. Hey, Mark, can we Star Wars the Universal monsters? Mark says, yeah, we can do that. So they fronted Jack Specific all this money. And if you look at this, if you go online, you look at the Van Helsing Jack Specific checklist, holy shit, dude. There's like almost 40 toys in this set. This movie didn't even do that good. And you've got like, you know, like usually you get a wave of figures and it's like maybe 3 to 6 characters from the film or from the property. They were just like, here's 12 figures, just go crazy. You know, you just buy everything. I will also say the likeness for Hugh Jackman is on point with these toys. It kind of looks like Hugh Jackman, you know, as much as it could in the early 2000s. We didn't have, you know, digital printing yet and all that sort of thing. But it looks good. They're rad. They've got cool weapons. Some of them glow. There's some good stuff. Here's the thing. You can go pick these toys up relatively inexpensively at this point. You go to collector shops, nobody really cares. The box art was crappy. It's got this weird blue tone. I'm not feeling it. They didn't sell well. And lucky for you, wacky toy collector, they're cheap. You can get these things pretty cheap. And that, my friend, is always a good thing. Because, again, this is 90% of all this stuff. They did a one-shot comic book. Dark Horse Comics produced it. Is Van Helsing from Beneath the Rue Morgue. It follows Van Helsing on a self-contained adventure that occurs during the events of the film, just after the death of Jekyll and Hyde in Paris. So you watch the prequel cartoon, and you're supposed to know all that stuff from the prequel cartoon, and then get this one-shot comic, which is the sequel to that cartoon. Van Helsing returns to Rome, and in this adventure, Van Helsing deals with Dr. Moreau, the island of Dr. Moreau, and his hybrid mutants. And these all would have been rad movies. If this thing would have worked, these could have all been cool sequels. Speaking of which, let's get to those canceled sequels. They were confident this thing would be a hit. It wasn't a hit, obviously. They paid to keep the original Transylvania sets because they figured, we're going to do a TV show, Mark. Are we? Yeah, we're doing a TV show. Plus, we're going to do more of these movies. Don't tear down the sets. So all of these sets, like the outdoor stuff, the horse stables, everything was kept in and maintained in working order for like a year because they figured, they're like, oh, we're going to do more of this, right? So they paid all this money in advance to have this stuff maintained and taken care of. They were like, all right. So they still have some of these sets up, which is crazy. They still use them for like Victorian stuff or Gothic stuff that's supposed to be like in the 1800s. They use them. One thing that has lived on from this movie, we didn't get any sequels. The sets have lived on, and they've been in a ton of Universal movies, which is insane. And most recently, by December 2020, we're going to reboot Van Helsing. Julius Avery was hired as the director. In addition to doing a rewrite of an original script by Eric Pearson, James Wan was attached to serve as the producer. The project would have been a joint adventure between Universal Pictures and Atomic Monster. Guess what? It didn't happen. Did not materialize. Okay, the trail goes cold because maybe, okay, you know what? We'll say it. COVID killed the Van Helsing gritty and dark reboot. Because if you've got James Wan as your producer, I would hope that he's like, all right, listen, we need to go more Conjuring and less Aquaman. If you're going to do Van Helsing again, it's got to be a dark and grounded character. Yeah, let's get into the Wolfman 2025, because I have to, like, now that we're doing all this Universal Monster stuff, I have to keep you in the know of what's happening. So Dwayne Johnson was pursuing the project, and then Ryan Gosling was attached. And now, neither of them are involved, and it's finally gone into production. Wolfman is billed as a blood-chilling reimagining of the classic Universal Monster pick. The film is directed by Leigh Whannell, who did Invisible Man and Upgrade. I think he's great. You know, I love The Invisible Man. Upgrade's a great movie. He also wrote the script. So it's written and directed by Leigh Whannell. Golden Globe nominee Christopher Abbott is in Poor Things. He's in Catch-22. It Comes at Night. He stars as a man whose family is being terrorized by a lethal predator. Julia Garner from Ozarks is the co-star. You know what? This Wolfman movie sounds pretty good. I mean, considering his Invisible Man was great. You can't, look, it's a great movie. You can't make a franchise out of it. I mean, it's a good self-contained story. I mean, he could come back, I guess, right? The Invisible Man, he like, oh, I wasn't dead, I was bleeding. But they were going to do an Invisible Woman movie directed by Elizabeth Banks. And then that got shelved because they were like, oh, let's just do this movie. Allegedly, there's a sequel in development, but I think he chose to do this over the sequel. That movie made the money. Like, The Invisible Man was a hit. Most recently, though, The Dark Universe, which is in Universal Orlando, that is the new epic universe. The Dark Universe will open in 2025, allegedly. It's under construction, man. I don't know. Maybe. Who knows when it's going to open? You're listening to this hopefully in the future, and you're like, oh, it opened last week, Jerry. They've reimagined the characters again. And wouldn't you know it, Van Helsing's back. But this time, it's the great-great-great-granddaughter of Van Helsing, and it's a girl. Ooh, look, we reinvented it. We really turned the world on its ear by making the new Van Helsing character. And you know what? She has the goofy hat and she has the trench coat that Hugh Jackman has in this movie. So nothing ever dies. And I hope, and I really hope, they have the new monster designs. You can go up, you can see Wolfman, you can see them. They've changed them because they wanted to make them more grounded so they could have the characters roaming the park. And they look different. They don't look like the classic Universal monster design. And this is my fear for the park, all right? Are you ready, folks? My fear for this park is that there's no Bela Lugosi. There's no Boris Karloff. It's all these new representations of these characters. We know that we're getting the steakhouse, which is Dracula's personal steakhouse. Get it? S-T-A-K-E. Yeah. It's going to be kind of the closest thing to fine dining in the area. We've got the Wolfman's Curse, which is the roller coaster. We're going to have a Kuka arm ride, just like the Harry Potter one, where it's going to be the Monsters Unleashed, and you go and you see all the different things. I think that's going to be a home run. They're doing a lot of different attractions that we don't really know about yet. There's some stuff they're keeping under wraps. It looks like Transylvania. That's what the whole theme is. By all accounts, from what we've seen, concept drawings and what they've started to build, it looks amazing, and I definitely want to go. My final thoughts on this film are very simple. I'm not sure if the Universal monsters can return in a meaningful way. When I think about being a kid and watching those movies on Channel 5, Dracula, Frankenstein meets the Wolfman, all these movies that I love so much, The Creature from Black Lagoon, I think we will always have a fond nostalgia for these characters. They have a place in our hearts, especially, for the older generation. My dad had model kits of the Universal monsters. It was a very time and place thing. It's iconic imagery. It's iconic designs that have stood the test of time and were probably pretty radically ahead of their time, to be perfectly honest, right? They've stuck with us. They're indelible images that live in our minds rent-free. When someone says Frankenstein to me, I generally see Boris Karloff in my head. That's when you say that word, you say that name. When you say the Wolfman, I'm thinking of Lon Chaney, Bela Lugosi. And it's been hard for me. I understand that all of those gentlemen have passed away. I understand it's a different time. And this is the cruelty of the passage of time as we know it. I don't think you'll ever get that again. I think that era was lightning in a bottle, and we need to look back at it. It's like a scrapbook. You look at it, you look at the photos or whatever. You say, oh, I love these guys. These guys are great. They got a special place in my heart. I don't know what moving forward the kids today, like, of course you've got your weird monster kids. Like, there's some kid who's 10 years old and he loves those classic Universal movies. He's fascinated by them. But I would say the majority of kids have not grown up with these films. Universal, for better or worse, they should just be showing these films everywhere. They should put them everywhere. You can watch them on Peacock, and I will say this Halloween, Peacock has a very solid lineup full of the monsters, pretty much every Universal monster movie. Peacock, honestly, and I'm going to say this, better than Shudder, better than all of them, better than Screambox, because they have this deep library. You want The Thing, you want the Wolfman's, we've got it. Chucky, we've got it all. With that being said, moving forward, I don't know. I don't know what the relevancy of these characters is. I think that the Dark Universe, the land that's at Epic Universe, will be the next move. Hopefully people go see this new movie with Julia Garner. They like that Wolfman, the Leigh Whannell version. Hopefully The land is just as epic as I imagine it in my mind. Kids are influenced by that, and the new Van Helsing, the granddaughter, and all that stuff in that version of Dracula. And that will be their Dracula. That will be the first one they see. Oh my God, I went to Universal Studios and I saw Dracula and the Mummy, and that's the version they're going to remember. And you know what? That's pretty cool. Because yeah, I love those monsters, and watching them on Channel 5 was cool. But we're talking about, this is an interactive experience. This is, they've done like the creatures in the parks, the monsters, but they've never done it like this, where they're going to be free roaming. They even recommend, they've talked about the park, they recommend that little kids after dark, you might not want to bring them there because there's going to be jump scares, there's going to be these characters, and it's all flesh and blood along with the rides. I don't know where we go from here. I really don't. I guess we're going to find out. That's just the way it works. So it's that time of the show where we get to unhinged reviews. Probably my favorite part of the show. This one is written by T12. This was an Amazon verified purchase. This is 1 star. Was this supposed to be a send-up? Who in their right mind would believe a monster whose head lights up like a bubble on a police car? Please tell me it is a joke. If so, it would be a funny movie for the under 15 crowd. If it is actually supposed to be scary, then, all caps, be afraid, be very, very afraid of seeing it. Wow, this guy's clever. Just as clever as his name, T12. Look, it's not that bad. You know, it's got its charms. It's got Hugh Jackman. He's sexy. He takes his shirt off. You never see that. You watch those Peter Cushing movies. Those Van Helsing, they're not taking their shirt off. He's like, yeah, look, I'm beefcake. Be very afraid of seeing it. No, it's a fine movie. It's a nice... Van Helsing is the perfect example of a movie. Like, say you're hungover. You're and it's around Halloween time, and you're like, you know what? It's on TNT. It's 30 minutes in, and just sitting there thinking about your Taco Bell order. And you're like, you're just like, fuck it. I'm giving in to the charms of Hugh Jackman because he's that good. Here's another one. This is a good one, too. This was from Target.com. Andrew Hart. It's a verified purchase. 1 star. 10 minutes in, and it's awful. If you're willing to settle for a terrible screenplay and bad acting, then this is the movie for you. Given that this was a digital order, I'm stopping here. I hope that Target will allow me to return it. Please don't waste your money. Dude, it's not that bad. It's not. Look, come on, man. You want your money back? You bought the Blu-ray, you bought the 4K, whatever you bought. Like, come on. Listen, producer Pete, yo, seriously, I've never bought a movie ever, and said I want to return this. Because if you're a true collector and you love physical media, you're like, I own this now. Like, that's all that matters. And you don't care. You're like, all right, well, it's terrible, but I own it. And that's like 90% of my collection. That's like, I have like these sealed copies of Chuck Norris movies. I'm never going to watch them. Maybe someday. That's my retirement plan. That's my 401k is Chuck Norris movies, sealed Chuck Norris movies. Hey, if anybody out there is interested in some sealed Chuck Norris movies. We've gotten to the end of the episode. I don't know how we did it, but we've reached the end, and it happens. Parting is such sweet sorrow. Should you watch Van Helsing? Yeah, it's not bad. Again, you get the kids, you get the Rugrats, throw it on. You guys like werewolves? He's going to turn into a werewolf. We're going to do this. This is what it's going to be. 20 years later, what is its value? If you were a kid, and this is really the secret to this whole film, if you were 6 years old when this came out and you saw it in theaters and you played the video games and you bought the toys, yeah, this movie probably has a warm, fuzzy feeling for you. And you know what? That's okay, dude. Nobody's going to take that away from you. I appreciate that. I get it. That's just like me being a little kid watching these classic monsters on Channel 5. And that's fine. We talk about fan service. We talk about these things like they're bad. No, nostalgia's good. Too much nostalgia will kill you. It will choke you. But in small doses, revisiting, it's almost like rediscovering, because I hadn't seen this probably since it came out in theaters. And I found it rather enjoyable. As goofy as it is, it works. It's a kid's film. You have to be in the mindset for that. But it's not too bad. And I guess at the end of the day, Pete, that's all we can ask for. It's not too bad. Folks, don't forget to follow us on social media. We're on X at The Offering. WJH, Instagram at Jerry Horror, TikTok at Jerry Horror. We're on YouTube. The Offering with Jerry Horror is on YouTube. You can listen to these. You want to put them on? You know, you get tired of watching influencers and their bullshit, and you're like, I need Jerry to bring me back down to reality and tell me about Van Helsing. Well then, go visit our YouTube. There's some interesting stuff that I'm not even going to tell you about. I want you to discover, because producer Pete and Ira is working on some stuff. We've always got some crazy, wacky stuff going on. We don't even realize it. We're so normal. I don't even know if we're normal, but we're just so, I guess we're so used to it that doing all this stuff is just like breathing for us. It's just not even, we don't bat an eye. It is what it is. Oh, TeePublic. Don't forget to go to TeePublic. Get a t-shirt. Get an Offering t-shirt. The David Graham experience. Get some of that going on. Get that on your chest. I know you want me on your chest. That's what you've dreamed of. You've gotten to the end of this episode and said to yourself, if only I could have this large, burly, hairy man on top of me. And that's exactly how I felt about Van Helsing. I'm Jerry Horror. This has been The Offering. Mostly horror, always genre. You've been listening to The Offering with Jerry Horror, produced by Pete Bune. If you have a question or story you want to share with me, we'd love to hear from you. You can email me at theofferingwithjerryhorror@gmail.com, or hit us up on Twitter at theofferingwjh, or hit me up on the Instagram at Jerry Horror. You get the picture? Subscribe to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you find your favorite podcast. Join us next time for another Offering.
This has been a Sick Boy Wolfgang production. Thank you for listening.